I was in college. I went to school in Boulder, Colorado. I studied computer science. And I think kind of my first like break was I worked at a big venture firm there. And through that got exposed to like a lot of companies and like just a lot of early stage startup stuff. You know, they were a venture fund and like whatever intern wasn't gonna like become an actual investment person there. But I like kind of stepped out and started just exploring other opportunities and ended up landing at Coinbase in 2018. So I was like kind of, let's say employee, if you count my like intern employee number, like employee number like 250 at Coinbase, um, around there, like 250, 300, and kind of like lived the at Coinbase that era where everyone was in person. It was really fun. We had like an office in SF. It was great. Um, I started out working on commerce um, with, you know, a few folks that have become like very well known. I mean, like, uh, my manager ended up being like the one of the lead eng that launched USDC at Coinbase. Um, and then kind of through my last year of school, so that was an internship. And then through my last year of school, they let me keep interning. I worked on the Paradex team, which the history there is like Paradex was actually like one of the coolest DeFi products that was like maybe just like a little too early in 2018, 2019. It was like a 0x relayer, and it was kind of like the one competitor to like Radar Relay, if you remember that like relayer era. Um, and They got bought by Coinbase in 2018, um, kind of with the intention of, you know, a lot of the ERC-20s are like smaller cap assets, and like how do we support that in ways that um, you know works works well in a decentralized way. I worked on that team for like 6 to 8 months. Uh, During that time, like lots was changing at Coinbase, so we ended up getting reorged a couple times, and I then kind of like spent the rest of my career there working across um, exchange, core financial infra, and ventures. So I worked on the exchange team. I helped like launch the Margin Bar Lend program on exchange in like 2019. Um, did a bunch of volume on that. Kind of like the first like real lending product that Coinbase had, um, was that margin thing. And then I worked on the core financial infra stuff, so like ledgering and transfers, systems that, you know, to this day move a lot of money. You know, kind of like ledger system moves on like orders of trillions of dollars a year, and just like net flows, and the ledger tracks today. I don't know what the number is, but it's probably something like 300-400 billion in assets. Um, and then Lastly, I got to work on ventures. So like because I had some venture capital background, you know, Sean and Huli kind of like let me play on the ventures team. I probably wrote like 30 to 40 early stage venture checks in crypto, including some like pretty big protocol names. Got like pretty involved with that. Um, yeah, and then after Coinbase, I started my own like Web3 data infra company. Um, this was in early 2022. Raised money, you know, from like solid VCs, Coinbase Ventures, Kindred, um, uh, yada yada, um, and like built that. I think the challenge and like the learning that I really got out of that was like uh, for infra stuff, especially infra stuff on EVM, it was like already so flushed out as a market that it was hard as like a new entrant to really um, like get market share. And then two is like crypto is a very like token driven business model, and it's actually really hard to create like venture scale outcomes that are not tokens in crypto. Um, and Kind of had that realization. Like I was really excited about the infra stuff and like the engineering and just like building, um, but just realized that like yeah, to create anything big, you kind of had to do tokens. Um, so I'll pause there. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for sharing the story, and definitely will like want to dig in on certain pieces, but just sort of continuing to get to modern day from where you left off. The sort of the thing that prompted me to reach out to organize this conversation in the first place was your recent launch of a site called hire.fun, and it's hire with like I think 7 R's, so not
Yeah,
to be confused with hire
on chain.
hire on chain,
We should talk about that too.
aimhire.net. We can talk about that. I coincidentally just I don't know when this episode will come out, but just today as we're having this conversation now, I released a Purple People episode, number 10, with Light, who is the founder of Hire, as in Hire on Chain, as in Hire Token, and aimhire.net and all of that. So big fan of Hire, that one, and everything that they're doing. But also was very intrigued to see your launch, which I initially, I think, actually saw your post, which was clarifying that this was something different than the other hire and that you weren't aware of the other hire. But maybe you can just talk a little bit about sort of what this is fundamentally and why you launched it.
Yeah, so I've been bopping around doing a lot of startups basically, kind of since I left Coinbase. And this is like I wouldn't call it solo because it's really a community thing, but like I'm the solo dev. And it's just kind of like a creative idea I had in crypto to create what I call evolutionary memes. So instead of like static image and
Evo-
name assets,
so sorry, evolutionary memes or evolutionary meme coins, you said? Is that right?
yeah, evolutionary
Okay.
meme coins.
Okay.
Like kind of like a visual narrative to the coin story itself.
Right.
And the way that the underlying technology works is it's actually a new protocol that is based off of some of the work that some other teams in the space have done around like fair launch bonding curve graduation uni pools. The difference is that it uses the price in the uni pool as oracle to then dynamically set right now we're doing the name, but it could also be the image or any other feature of the token. So as the market cap of the token moves, the asset itself dynamically changes its identity, basically. So like a really fun one that we had just launched yesterday was the like I don't know coin, and the ticker is IDK, and it's a like ASCII art shrugging emoji, and as the price goes up, it just like shrugs more. And so it's just kind of like a cute interactive gamified way to interact with these coins, which is fun. And then we also introduced the concept of, since we have like a evolutionary progression to what the meme is, we're also minting NFTs. So if you buy more than 0.1% of the supply, you get an NFT that has that symbol like inscripted on it, basically, and it's a way to show that you were like early to that, basically.
So
Um,
if there's a coin with let's say you know 7 tiers, I think was like the default for each point at which it sort of changes the name, depending on its market cap, basically. And so let's say there's like sort of 7 different tiers, and so anyone who mints like from the beginning to when it sort of reaches that first threshold, do they all get this like initial tier NFT, which like shows that they're early, and then anyone who buys thereafter,
gets the next
I
tier,
might have said mint.
basically.
Yeah, I might have said mint
Yeah,
earlier, but what I meant was like, when they buy tokens before, anyone who buys a token before a certain market cap is reached gets, NFT A, which shows that they're like early as possible. And then anyone who buys, between the reaching of tier A and the reaching of tier B, if it gets to tier B, gets NFT B, and et cetera. Is that right?
yeah, that's like the exact thought. And the thought is that, especially for whatever like large cap coins launched through the protocol, that the early NFTs will be like extremely valuable. Like I think for our initial like launch coin, which is kind of a joke, there's like only 11 of the earliest tier, and it will like almost never reach that market cap again. So they're very, very rare assets. Um,
It'll
yeah,
never reach that market cap in that it has risen to a level and will not go
it's like
down to the level that it
very,
started.
yeah, like it would need to hit like a, I don't know, $30,000 market cap or something. And right
Right.
now it's sitting at like, 1.3 million.
Okay. And
So like,
if it does go down, like maybe not all the way to that first band, but if it goes just in general, if you have one that goes up, like let's say it's just kind of surfing right around the threshold, like the limit, and it's going like above the limit and then below the limit, like someone can like sort of get the NFTs on both sides of that threshold. Is that right? Like it's not like an irreversible thing where like you
yeah,
can only
yeah,
get it
exactly.
if it's before it reaches the threshold, but if it goes back into a certain band, then you can dip in and get that NFT as well.
Exactly. And it's actually a really interesting price dynamic. So with that initial asset that we launched, it's called Harder. It's kind of a dick joke, which we'll talk about later.
Oh, I
But
scooped that I scooped that one up, honestly.
um,
I don't think
uh,
I highly doubt that I got the first like the first 11 NFT, but I don't know. I might have got something.
we're seeing really interesting trading dynamics with it though, where uh there's a level like right around 730K. And at this point, it's bounced off that level several times. There's like a natural psychological level to like the community knows that they get NFTs below that level. And so there's a lot of buy pressure at it effectively.
Oh, they want
Um,
to defend against other people being able to dip back into that territory for that NFT.
yeah, it's like a very interesting trading dynamic. So the
Where where are the NFTs? Like are they like I believe that I bought I forget, do you have like Uniswap on the site or like how do you I forget like where I saw it, but basically I saw, you had the site. I saw it before you launched and then like when it was just a preview site. The preview message, by the way, like the language that you had on the landing page was great. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit too. But I saw
Mhm.
that and then like, I don't know, a few days later or a week later or something, I saw you launched and had already sort of like mentally noted it. And then so I saw that, each one of these platforms seems to have like, the first like token is kind of important or like the first platform launched token is important. So I was like, okay, I'll go scoop some of the harder. And I don't really play significantly in with any of these things, or at least I haven't yet to date. Just because like I don't know, I am like very bullish on Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I don't really I view the entire crypto space as being extremely risky, and I've also leaned in very hard, both in terms of like the percentage of my overall money and the percentage of my work that is in crypto. And so within crypto, I don't feel the need to be overwhelmingly risky, and so I just kind of I try to play around at the edges with like and true it's not really playing if you're like swinging massive amounts of money or whatever, but and massive is relative for whoever it is, not necessarily in absolute terms, but just in relative terms. So I like to basically take relatively small amounts of money for myself and just like play with all these things. And so I did the same with this and got some. And so I think I just bought it on Rainbow and I don't know like do I have NFTs somewhere from it or like how would that work exactly? Do I have to like claim them somewhere? Or?
so with the NFTs, the one feature of the NFTs is that they have to be through our protocol. So our protocol has like specific buy sell functions, which kind of wrap three features of functionality. One is the bonding curve mechanic. Two is the Uniswap graduation, and then trading through the Uniswap pool mechanic, and then three is the NFT minting. So like functionally, you need to like uh, hit the buy button on our website because that goes
Mm,
through the higher protocol, which mints the NFTs. And
I
like the
see.
minute the NFT contract is like a child contract to the token. So they're related and they have like functions that you can, pull the addresses of each from. Um, so yeah, anyway, the NFT functionality you have to buy through the higher website, if that
I
makes
see.
sense.
So
And it's not very
I,
clear.
I might have I might have done that. I honestly I can't remember. I don't know if I bought it through the website or like just directly through Rainbow if I searched it or whatever. So I can go back and check. And then so if I did do that with what I don't have to like make a wallet on Hire, right? Like I could just connect an existing wallet.
Yeah, connect an existing wallet, and then the NFTs like show up in your wallet. I can like send you some screenshots of what they look like. Um, yeah, and they're pretty basic, like NFTs that show up in a wallet. It's like a collection. It's like you can trade them on OpenSea. We're working on support through our UI to support the NFTs. Um, so yeah, that's kind
Is
of
the
the story there.
is the art intended to be like super nice and special, or is it like more so just a I don't know, like a Pope, roughly speaking, where it's like sort of a it's just like a record and like proof of the thing, like in this case that you were early, not intended to be like necessarily like a beautiful piece of art.
Yeah, it's in the same like green hacker typer text that the site's in.
Got it.
And
So it's like a
basically what
credential.
it's kind of like a credential, and it's just like centered on the NFT is the the symbol that you bought it at, right? So for like the shrugging emoji, you'll get like the earliest shrugging emoji example, and then the it has the number of tokens, the cost of ETH, and the block time, like the timestamp.
Hmm.
Um, and it's just like organized well on the NFT. If that makes sense. So it just kind of shows that you were early, effectively.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So let me think, just rewinding a little bit. So I sort of the name currently is the name or the ticker that's evolutionary or both?
It is the name. You could
The
do
name.
both, but we wanted to anchor the tickers because a lot of people like search on tickers, if that makes sense.
Right.
Um,
You don't have to search for something new.
yeah, and the especially because like we have a lot of them that are changing the names like very dynamically. Like last night, one of the community members launched one called Yes, and Yes's levels are no, and then it adds just O's, and then the last level is okay, yes indeed, um, which is pretty funny. And basically like it would just be really hard to like search for that as an asset because like the name is changing. But the the symbol is static, and then the protocol actually supports dynamic images too. So we'll likely support that in the coming weeks.
Got it. Yeah, I think the images sounds interesting as well. Just as I think just as interesting as changing the name would be changing the image. Cool. Well, maybe you can talk a little bit about the message that you had up on the website, which I think sort of spoke to some of the motivation for doing this in the first place. Like it was a pretty cool, like roughly, I don't know, short paragraph or something like that. And like, when did you come up with that? Like, did you have that before you even thought of doing this, or you had that, you came up with that after building it and sort of realizing what you were building? How did that like come about?
Yeah, I mean it's a long story that is very like um, philosophically and ideologically motivated in crypto, if that makes sense. Like I've been doing crypto for quite a long time, and I've been around it, and I've just like spent a lot of time understanding it. And if you look at even like the large cap coins, um, like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana, like they actually map a lot closer to like ideologies than they do like currencies or companies, if that makes sense. They're like very like community driven. The word that someone used on Twitter, which I kind of like added to one of the pages on the website, is like asset backed religions. Like they're just
Mm,
like people get really um kind of secular almost about what cryptocurrencies they're involved in and like work with. And the way that I view hire is like uh, the initial language on the website is just like about how there's this kind of like extra abstraction layer on top of our like social kind of system where ideas and memes live basically, and you can like see it on Twitter, and you can see it through kind of like all of these like financialization of these assets where the idea itself actually has value given to it by kind of like a shared human construct for like what people believe it's worth, essentially. Like if you look at like the largest cap meme coins like WIF and all of the other ones, it's just like a shared belief in an idea. There's no like inherent utility or value to it, but it's just kind of like the idea that uh, ideas themselves have value, and crypto allows you to kind of um,
Quantify it.
you quantify it and trade it, and all of a sudden you have like a capital market for ideas, effectively, which is just like super cool, and just kind of like intellectually there's a lot of intellectual curiosity on my end for that idea. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and it does make sense, and I'm similarly intrigued and have been. I completely agree on like Bitcoin, for example. Like one of my first pieces of writing that I did on Bitcoin was I forget what it was titled exactly, but I think it was like Bitcoin as a belief system. And
Yep.
basically the idea was, and this was like I wasn't tremendously early to crypto, but kind of was on my radar in like 2016, bought a tiny bit in like 2017, wrote it up, wrote it down, and then more seriously, like it finally clicked for me in like revisiting it in 2019, when I had some like sort of time on my hands to like, follow my interests, and crypto was one of those things that I wanted to, look into a little bit more. It was just sort of like very surface level, like being aware of it prior to that. And so none of this was like super early or anything, but even at that time, um, I was like trying to understand, Bitcoin as an investment opportunity, if nothing else. And I was like, here's this thing that's gone from, you know, um, nothing or, a penny or whatever to, uh, what was it around then? I guess it was, I don't know, maybe around like 10,000 or something. And like it's had it's had these 90%, 80%, 70% crashes, and somehow has come back every time. And if you had something that was going to go from zero to the market cap of gold, it would be impossible for it to take a straight line there, because you'd have this thing that's like going up, you know, 3x or 5x or whatever every year for some number of years. And after year 1 or 2, people will be like, hey, here's this thing that goes up 3 or 5x every year. Like, I should buy that. And then, the price gets out of hand. And then, eventually some people, the last people to hear about it are like, some people start to sell because they, 1 year goes up 10x or whatever, and then the people who were the latest in probably have the least conviction because they were the latest to get in, and then they panic sell, and then the whole thing dumps and crashes, and it can still come back, but that's like sort of that's why something can't just take like a straight line up and to the right from 0 to 10 trillion or 20 trillion or whatever. Like it just by definition sort of has to be a bumpy ride. And so you see something that's sort of like, you know, very early. Sorry, did you say something?
No, I should totally
Yeah,
confirm. Like that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. And so you see something that's sort of like early on that ride, and just like the dumbest possible version of it is like, okay, here we have internet native money. Like that was like sort of my 2017 thing, where I was just like convinced enough to put a very tiny amount of money. Like it was like, a few $100 or something like that. And I was just like, oh, here, like, internet money, that kind of makes sense. And it's gone up for a while, so might just keep going. That was like the extent of my looking into it back then. And then 2019 comes around, I start like digging in more, and feeling like I understand it. And so like, uh, talking about sort of like why something can't go in a straight line. And so I started to think about it, and I was like, sort of from a similar perspective, you have in 2019, you have a relatively small percentage of the world that is familiar with and understands and is invested in, or some combination of those sort of things, is sort of quote unquote in on Bitcoin. And that's like a very small percentage of the world relatively. And, you sort of look at these people and they seem to be, to your point, like pretty religious about it at a pretty high rate. Like there's not a whole lot of people seemingly at that time you look around that are like kind of indifferent on Bitcoin and just happen to own a bunch. Like the people who are in are like really pretty in. Like it seems like a very sort of viral belief system, if you will, and like one that like really sort of consumes the people who it infects, not to use like sort of a negative word. Um, but
Totally.
so you sort of see that, and then you're like, okay, well, here's this thing that like the people who believe in it seem to believe in it very strongly, and the vast majority of the world still hasn't been like sort of introduced to it yet. And so like if the thing continues to just sort of like attract people, has basically like there's so many more people to, I wasn't using this term at the time, but like basically get like orange pilled or crypto pilled. There's so many people out there that haven't yet been like sort of exposed, and so far the thing has proven like very viral. And yet, and then on the other side of that, there's so few people who could sort of like churn and could like, you know lose faith. There's so few people who could, and then it doesn't seem like very many are. And so you're just like, the rate at which people are going to adopt this belief system versus the churn rate of the people who are already in. If you just sort of like play that out, it just seemed to me that like this is like going to be crazy. And um, roughly that's just continued to prove out since then. Like who knows, if and when like, I'm not saying that it necessarily will continue, but like the logic makes a ton of sense. And so I don't know, to me at least. And so, from that time, obviously that was just the very start of his like understanding Bitcoin as an investment opportunity. That's before I'd even, seen or done anything with like Ethereum or whatever. But I do agree with you that like Bitcoin, coming back to your point, like Bitcoin is just like a pure belief system, and gold, people talk about gold similarly. Obviously, it's like, why is gold worth more than silver or whatever? It's like, well, gold, it's kind of worth a lot because people believe it's worth a lot, and
I
because they
mean,
have for thousands of
that
years.
that's the general story around money too. Like if you look at money historically, it's the same thing. Like the original money was like seashells, and we just decided that like seashells were of rare enough like they were rare enough that they could be our money, and everyone decided that they were like worth something, right? And so instead of bartering, we started trading with seashells, right? And the same thing happened with many early coins, like literal coins and gold and stuff like that. And so like it's like humanity's ability to just like project some like arbitrary like value on something that is like objectively like yes scarce, but like it doesn't have value inherently, is very interesting, and it's just an interesting space to be playing
Yeah, and so I think what's interesting now, I mean, there's a bunch of things, but like, um, my sort of one of my questions is how long does it like gold you can rely upon. I mean, there's a few sort of outlier situations, like if they, you know, figure out how to mine asteroids and these asteroids have a ton of gold, then suddenly the supply gets this huge influx and maybe the price of gold per unit plummets. So there's like, there are possible sort of things. Also, maybe it's just a generational thing, and maybe Bitcoin is taking not only, catching up to gold in terms of market cap, but gold has continued to grow all along as Bitcoin has emerged. Maybe that is not the case in perpetuity. Maybe, our generation just really doesn't value gold that much relative to Bitcoin and relative
it's
to, other digital, scarce assets. And so like,
It's it's
I'm not
possible as
saying
the belief systems change, right? Like that
exactly.
the value equation changes. And also, like, not to be this guy, but like Bitcoin is a much better asset than gold generally. Like it's definitely scarce. Like you can't change the supply. And the like portability of it is so much better too. I mean, there's like, transfer time issues and stuff, but like compared to a gold bar, like way better.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%. And so like, with something like gold though, like it's because it's been, valued for so long, it's reasonable to assume that that will continue. And the question is like, Bitcoin is what, 15 years old. Um, and like, it's a little easier now, especially with like certain institutional adoption where you think it's probably not going to be blacklisted by most of the world governments at this point, and various things that have sort of just happened within like the last year or two. Um, but like a few years in for Bitcoin, where it's at like the super low price and market cap, and like people are speculating that it could be digital gold or whatever it might be. At that time they might have still been sort of thinking about it as cash, but regardless of what it is, like my belief is that to believe that Bitcoin would become what it has already become, let alone what it might become in the future, like in the first like year or two of its existence, like you would have had to have been like completely delusional. Like that wouldn't have made sense. Like
Totally.
it was basically
Yeah.
indefensible like sort of stance to take. However, you would have been absolutely right. And so
Yep.
like at that point, it's sort of
It is like
a demonstration of faith.
it's literally faith. It's like an unwavering belief that that thing is going to be the thing. But like the cool thing about faith is like faith is powerful. It's powerful, especially within groups, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and I think like one of my learnings in crypto and like why so like higher isn't just my thing. It's like it's a permissionless protocol on chain. The way I deployed it, at least the V1, is like I don't even have keys. Like it's just a thing that exists. You know, anyone can build on it. And like the power is really in the communities of people that like come together to um uh get behind those things, you know, to get behind like whatever idea that you're putting out into the world. And so like I actually think that like the way to build like products and communities in this space, kind of the like traditional VC venture capital mantra of like we're going to raise a bunch of money and like do all that stuff, I think that's kind of BS. Like I think it's all about really being able to just like build a like grassroots thing that has like a core belief in what the idea is and like have people excited about that, you know, because then it grows virally. You know, you don't need to spend tens of millions of dollars on marketing and all of that. You just kind of like have people that like what you're doing. And there's a lot of power in that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just thinking like as you're saying this, I have some trouble with this, I would say, with some of the projects like that I'm working on, especially in the last year, where I don't feel good about sort of broadcasting and tweeting and whatnot that this thing is going to do super well. Like, so I'm thinking of like these early Bitcoin people who uh, we're doing that. Like this is going to be the next, blah, 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 global financial or global, world reserve currency or like whatever it is.
Mhm.
Speaking matter of factly about things that are ultimately, resulting from one's faith, not possibly things that could be known. And so I feel
Well,
kind of, hesitant to make assertions like that. But I think the key sort of, term to use really, is directly faith related, which is just believe. You can believe something, quite strongly, or not even that strongly. You can just sort of believe it, more likely than not, or whatever, without having to have proof or without, necessarily like, you could just have been wrong, basically. And I think to share that belief is different than to share a certainty. And I just, I think there's plenty of people who have no problem sort of saying something is going to happen without like any qualifiers. And I'm just like not one of those people. But to
yeah.
say that you believe something is going to happen, it's still a little uncomfortable to me sometimes because it's like, I know that I could be wrong. If you didn't know that you could be wrong, like it wouldn't be a thing of faith. It would just be like a fact. But I think sharing something like that is reasonably responsible. It's just hard within this space where, you never want people to like lose a lot of money on your
Whatever you're
projects.
building.
Even if you genuinely thought it was going to work, you should be able to acknowledge that you can't know, right?
Yeah, and you know, I think I will acknowledge that I probably fucked some of this up. But like my philosophy on how to build these is like for whatever the core team um to be, just to not really focus on like price or like the speculative nature, but like kind of what I've done since we've launched Hire is I really just doubled down on um like soon to be more product, like there's more product stuff coming in the next week or so. And then two is just like the community of people that are excited about not the price of like harder, even though that's kind of our like launch token or marquee token, but like actually the main effort that I've been putting in is I have this like higher core group chat, which to the extent there are like thousands of people interested in this, there are, but there's like really only like 30 to 50 that are like really in on the idea about what we're building, not just like the coins and the price that the coins are gonna go to. And so that group chat has actually been like really fun because I just have like a bunch of people that are like engaged and they're throwing out ideas and giving me product feedback and like helping me build this thing. You know what I mean? Like we're not just like building a coin that is going to go to like X price. We're actually like building like a product platform kind of like ideology around what it is, and it's collaborative. And I think that that's probably like the most fun part about it.
Right. So, how did you, well, just logistically, I'm curious, where does this group chat live? Is it like a Telegram or something?
Yeah, just on Telegram.
Telegram.
I just have
Yeah.
like a high trust. I send an invite link if you've been really engaged on Twitter and Discord, and add people.
Okay. Yeah. I was curious. That was gonna be my other question. Is like, how have you built this list or filtered this list from the broader, number of thousands or whatever who have like engaged in some fashion? So it's basically just like identifying quality people as the project has sort of come out and giving them an invite when you see them.
Yeah, totally. And then like just making it clear in that group chat that like it's really not super price focused. Like you can talk about fun things you're launching, but like it's not super price focused, and it's more about like product and what we're building. And like we have a lot of cool stuff coming together. Like one of the community members, kind of like last night into this morning, we actually just tweeted a video that like entirely he made. Like he just made a video that like kind of highlights the the both the tokens and kind of what they do. And it's that kind of stuff that I'm trying to double down on, not like the let's just like pump the one price of this coin to the moon, if that makes sense. um
Yeah.
Although we are I do want to say we are as I'm on this podcast, I should say that we are like pushing our like main coin a little bit, mainly because like there's a strategy around the main coin on your launchpad initially doing well is important.
Right.
But
You're like, having said all of that, pump it. But besides
yeah,
that,
I'm trying to toe a line. Like
yeah.
I basically where I'm at is like as the builder of this, what I care about the most is actually the like core quality of the tech and the community that's built around that. That is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Right. And so I'm thinking there's a couple of things. So one is you weren't aware of Hire when you launched Hire. The other people can figure out what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the let's call it
Higher on
the
chain.
green Hire versus Evolution Hire.
Cool.
So you weren't aware of the green Hire when you launched the Evolution Hire. And I sort of I've seen you on Farcaster as of late. I think I looked at like it was basically that was the original cast I saw where you were like, I didn't know about Green Hire. And but have you spent much time on Farcaster? Like what's your given, I'm calling this
Yes.
purple people. And it doesn't matter. What's that?
Yeah, no, I can just tell my whole story there. So
Yeah.
I spent a bunch of time on Farcaster probably like 2 years ago. I think my Farcaster ID is like sub 2000. Like I'm very
Nice.
early on Farcaster. And I'm like I was part of the Purple DAO that Chris did and like all of that stuff. Like I was really interested in all the Nounish stuff. And I kind of Dan and Varun would not be happy with me saying this, but like I kind of fell off it. Like I turned effectively and like spent
Yeah.
more of my time on Twitter. And I'm like working on getting back into it. But because I was off of it, I just like wasn't aware of the community stuff going on there. Hire being like one of them. And so when I launched kind of like the viral, I don't know if you saw the tweets that was like pledge allegiance or whatever. Um,
Yeah, I did. I think
uh,
I participated.
yeah, when I launched that, I won't call him out, but a very well known Coinbase person pinged me and was like, "This is really cool. Let me help." And then he was like, "By the way, there's this community on Parcaster, and like, you're totally in a name conflict with them." And so there was kind of a like panic, like how to try to solve that problem the night of. And basically, what I want to do is like, I'm working on trying to find some way to pay it forward to that. I've talked with a few of the like leaders of Hire, and I'm like in some group chats, and I threw out that idea around like a buy burn mechanic, but it doesn't seem like that's actually what the community really wants. It seems like they'd actually like to have more of like a community fund type thing funded by our fees. Um, and that I'm like super down for. Like, it's just my thing. There are no VCs involved. I can kind of like do whatever the fuck I want with the fees. And I also don't have to like, pay myself a lot of money. So like we can just make it happen. And I just haven't had time to organize that. So like the things that I'm working on right now is I'm gonna change the branding a little bit. Like I think the 7 R's is fine. Like we have 7 fucking R's in our name. And then I'm gonna just change the logo. Like the upwards logo is just a coincidence that you name something higher. You have like two options. It's like chart with upwards trend or up arrow.
Right.
That's your logo, you know. And so I just picked that one. And so I'm gonna change it to like the chart with upwards trend kind of branding, to like kind of differentiate. Um, and then I think like I'm probably gonna make a podcaster post just about um what it's been like building this. Like there's some interesting being a founder of it. Just like I've caught some heat. I've also caught like a lot of love for people just being excited about what we're building. And I'd like to just like talk about that in a way that is like real, if that makes sense. Um, and so the plan for like today or tomorrow is to switch those things up. And the reason that it hasn't happened already is just because um, I effectively have like built this in the last 2.5 weeks, and that's just an insane timeline to like launch a new protocol and a product around it and build a community and like do all this stuff. And so I just haven't had time to like address the branding conflict. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it'll be fine. I mean, well, first of all, like I personally believe that like long form media solves a lot of conflicts. Not necessarily as as much as maybe like nothing against him. He's great, but like Lex Friedman sort of is like,
Yeah.
like long conversations are gonna just like solve everything. But to be honest, like it's sort of I don't know, like there is some truth to that, I believe. As one example, like I've had a number of like Bitcoin maximalists on my podcast who are like pretty toxic with the tweets. Um, some of whom like, increasingly after I had them on, but some of whom, even like before I had them on, I sort of knew what it was about, but I'd also dug in and listened to them on podcasts and read their long form writing, and like they're long, like it's all great and like very reasonable. And then it's just their tweets that are like kind of like, and there's not too many of these people, but like at least a couple guys who I've had on my podcast, or they're like, this is my other podcast, Pot of Jake, but they're like, their tweets are just like very like radical and like toxic, and like, everything else is a shit coin, like including like Ethereum or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, guys, like, but like that, I have them on the podcast and we have a conversation, and like they're actually like really reasonable. Like they, for example, are open, like, I don't mean to speak for like a bunch of people, but as one example, like, I might have someone on who says like Bitcoin is inevitable as a tweet, but then when you actually talk about it, um, they don't believe that. Like they don't, and it's not like they're lying, but they're just sort of like rounding up to 100%. But they will acknowledge the possibility that, for example, like I remember one guy, he believed, which I also mostly believe, that the concept of Bitcoin, something like Bitcoin, is practically inevitable. It might look a bit different, but like roughly speaking, you know, something like Bitcoin is inevitable, but there is a possibility that, you know, if all of the world governments like sort of took, I'm just making one example, like all the world governments take a very negative stance. Again, this is less likely now than it was a few years ago, but like something like that, and then Bitcoin gets kind of blacklisted and just doesn't really, like, kind of fails to grow into its possible destiny that people see for it now, and instead something else comes along in 3 years because like the current set of cryptocurrencies are just kind of like, you know, completely like cut off by this whatever this punitive regulation is, and the actual one that like sort of finally breaks through to like the next level, you know, comes about in like 2 years or something like that. Like things like that are possible. And so, anyway, this is getting like way too detailed on a point that isn't really
Well, okay,
directly
so
relevant to
to hit on that, like the Bitcoin thing, I don't think is stoppable because of how grassroots it is. And then on the like higher thing, um, I think the other thing that's tough about it is that like I really think higher on chain is quite cool. Like it's like a super cool vibe and like a
oh yeah,
cool
it's great.
community. And I just think that like the the like kind of tongue-in-cheek jokingness of what I'm building is like in some ways like an ideological conflict, and it's just very like unfortunate that there's a name conflict there. And like I think both things are awesome. You know, like I
Well,
think that they're both great potential products and communities. And so like I just have no real bad blood or issue there, and I'm trying to do like my best faith thing to just like separate them in a way that is like clean. And no, like eventually like someone's going to be unhappy, but that's just how the world works. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think it'll be
um,
fine. Like I said, so coming back to the core point of like higher and higher, I think yeah, they're really good people like at the core of it, and just like generally like positive sum and stuff. And from what you're saying and the things that you're planning and wanting to do, like I just think, you know, there's plenty of sort of room in the middle of the Venn diagram where you guys will be able to like sort of figure something out. I do wonder though, just like logistically, like it's great if you could, you know, some of the fees go towards something that's higher aligned and whatnot, but just as an alternative path or something along, you know, that could be done, you know, in addition to, is there enough on, like, it's not like the original token that you have is called higher, it's actually called harder, and like it,
yeah.
and yeah, obviously domain names can change. Like, is there anything fixed at like the protocol level or otherwise that would prevent you from actually just like rebranding completely to something else, or it's kind of that boat has sailed from your perspective?
The answer is anything is possible. I like the only thing that's like really set in code, and it's not really set, is that the original protocol, the name on the Solidity tokens are called higher tokens with 7 Rs. So that's probably the only thing that cannot be changed. Um Otherwise, yeah, everything else is, like immutable. I think that, my perspective on uh the word hire, like the way it works in like general, like in companies, for instance, is that if you like, start a competing company with the same name in the same space, then you can run into trademark issues, right? And we're like slightly in that territory, like we're both working on crypto stuff on base, but also like very different projects, if that makes sense,
Yeah,
with different goals. And so like that stuff is separate. And I think like a very good start, and like what I'm going to start with is just like separating the like branding effectively, like the
yeah,
logos and the vibes and all of that stuff. And I guess I'm just gonna like see how that lands. And if the community is like really still quite upset about the naming of it, I can work with my community and like think about changing it to something else. I haven't even really given thought to like what we could change it to. Um, but I'm definitely not in the boat of like I'm gonna like make enemies on this. It was just like an honest mistake on my end, I think. Not even a mistake. It was just like I was unaware. If that makes
yeah,
sense.
just didn't know. Yeah, it makes
Yeah.
sense. And yeah, I think with well, so there's like so with a possible name change. I'm not like I don't want to. I'm not like pushing for that or anything. I'm just sort of thinking out loud. I feel like higher is it makes sense and it's great because especially with all the R's because sort of communicates
The
everything at once.
evolutionary,
Yeah, the
yeah.
multiple R's communicates that you can like add these R's every time, and then higher communicates that it like happens as the price goes up.
Mhm.
And I just wonder if there's something that like what other words are most relevant for communicating that, not only like not just for the use in a possible name change or something, but just for the use in sort of communicating it as efficiently as possible what this what is new about this. So
Yeah.
and obviously like sort of there's we've used the word evolution, which I think is quite nice. It's a few syllables, so it might be kind of could be difficult in certain it's not the briefest thing possible, but like it's one word obviously, and it pretty well describes what it is. Like I guess adaptive could be another thing, but I think evolution is better because it implies evolving like better and forward rather than adapting, which is just like sideways potentially or down. And then uh there's like you use the word static to describe what it's not earlier, so there's this concept of like static and dynamic. um there's this concept of like the various thresholds and the levels and like steps, like you could call them like step coins or something like that. I don't know, like there's a bunch of words basically, like
It's
evolution
a
tokens.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like sort of a bunch of these terms, and I just think it will be interesting anytime that you create something genuinely new. Even if obviously like meme coins exist, but meme coins that evolve don't, or meme coins that evolve and give you an NFT which shows when you bought them don't. So there's like these few or these couple like sort of truly novel elements, and anytime you sort of do something like that, you have the opportunity I think to come up with
With
no
new
pun
like
intended.
nomenclature.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You
Yeah.
coin the new terms. So
Yeah.
it'll be
So
interesting I think to just sort of see the no pun intended evolution of that like sort of as you go forward.
And what I'm kind of doing is like also just so people get to know me a little bit better, like I'm just like through and through a builder. Like my sweet spot is just writing code all day, every day. And just like building great products. I'm also good at just like being able to do it in a way that is like tempered and philosophical. Like for instance, the way that we built Hire, um, I spent a lot of time on the protocol. Like of the time that we spent shipping, like I would say 80% was protocol work. And and then the front end that we launched, I swear to God, there was like an issue with the front end that we had put together prior with like another team member, who's great, nothing against them. And kind of from like 2 a.m. on Monday to like 5 p.m. on Tuesday, I just like rewrote the whole thing. So like it was like those 15 hours that like it actually came together from a product perspective. Anyway, so I build stuff, I ship stuff. I really love building. I think that that's like the thing that I'm uniquely talented at. And where it comes down to like the nomenclature and kind of like the language used around it, part of what I'm doing is I'm actually just like letting the community create that, you know? Like it's maybe best if I'm not the person who like sticks the pin in like whatever the words that we're going to use around it is. And it actually goes the same way with the tokens. Like, yes, the harder token is funny and kind of like a tongue-in-cheek thing, but like it's a permissionless protocol and platform. So like anyone can create any token. And like I think a good example is like the I don't know token that launched yesterday, where it's just fun. It's like purely fun. People are having fun trading it. And it has nothing to do with me. Like I didn't have that idea. Um, it was some other team that I'm like friends with. You know what I mean? And so um I'm kind of just like allowing other folks in the community to like come up with that language. And if that drives a name change, like totally down. I'll buy the domain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I have no real like affinity for naming. And the way that I've always looked at naming with startups generally is that you know, community is the most important thing. Like community, your customer, like who is actually using it is the most important. And everything else can actually be like quite dynamic. Like you can change the branding of something pretty easily. And the fact that we're
2.5 going on 3 weeks into this project from inception, like changing it is not hard at this very moment. I think it's more just like, does the community have a drive to change it? Uh, over, is it like, yeah, it's just like, what is the bonus on us, basically?
Yeah, I think it'll just be interesting. Like I said, I have complete
Maybe this
confidence
podcast
that
will come out and I'll be in a lot of trouble. But who knows?
no, it'll be like I have no issue. I have no sort of doubt that like you between you and your early community and the higher folks, like no, there's gonna be like no ill will. My only question really is what is actually best for the two projects. Like if this turns out to generate a ton of fees and those are going towards funding, you know, higher green, aim higher, higher on chain type stuff, then that could be the most useful thing. But also, like it might give like your project might be more likely to be more successful with a different name. And I'm not saying that is the case, but I'm saying that could be the case. And so I have no concerns about like ill will or disagreement between the two projects, just knowing the people, over there and having spoken with you just now, having pretty decent sense of like what you're about. The question is just like genuinely like what is the best for both projects, and I think that will be an interesting conversation for you guys to have.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I know we are we've gone over the allotted time, but it's been a bunch of interesting stuff. Before we wrap, is there anything in particular that like we didn't touch on that you want to sort of like close with, or pretty much covered most of the bases? And obviously, we can have more conversations in the future.
No, I'm pretty good. It was great to chat, great to meet. Love to see when this goes live. I'm excited. First podcast I've ever done. And yeah, appreciate it. And I'm gonna try to get more active on Warpcast. I think the thing that is like kind of hard to understand outwardly about this whole thing is that because it's like come together so fast, I've just had very little time to triage things that are like pretty important because other things are just like burning fires, basically.
Right.
And so, as like things have settled and like the platform is stable and the prices are kind of settling and certain coins are going off, like I'm finally getting time to just like focus on some of these things. And so, yeah, you should see more from me there in the coming days.
Nice. Yeah, I don't think it doesn't need to be like an urgent thing or a pressure thing, but I asked earlier because I've probably joined, I guess roughly it sounds like the same time as you, and have been really like, we talked about how like the price of Bitcoin can't be like a line straight up to the right for obvious reasons. But
Yep.
my Farcaster usage has kind of been like a pretty like steady line up and to the right. I feel like since I started, like I started with just sort of like mirroring Twitter and like just cross posting or whatever, and then now it's really at the point where it's more of the cross posting is going in the other direction, and I'm far more active on Farcaster than on Twitter, and probably have been for the last 6 to 12 months or something like that. So I think like naturally as you start dipping in a little bit more, especially like you might want to consider, well, you might wait until the name thing settles down, but at some point, whatever name you do sort of firmly, have an idea that you're going to stick with for the future. You create a channel, and then the people who dig the protocol join the channel. You could even just create a channel now based on the name of the first coin if you wanted to or something. And that's kind of why I asked like where your community lived, because, or where that group chat lived, because I've sort of been wondering like with Farcaster, with these channels, you can build these communities that, the content is public versus group chat, which you have to be in to see it. And I've sort of resisted building group chats. First of all, I just don't really enjoy them. Like it's too many notifications. I don't know. It's too busy. I don't really, I'm like, for someone in crypto, I'm confident I am like 99.99 percentile in the least group chats. Like I'm in like nothing. And so I sort of have resisted that, and I've opted for, building communities in channels on Farcaster, with the idea that a lot of that, private conversation will happen in public. The issue is people just don't have the same like sort of muscle memory or whatever for like the mental grooves for how to, share like a ton in like a channel. And so the volume ends up being more like what their tweet volume would be like versus what their group chat, texting volume would be like. So it's kind of interesting, but I think Warpcast channels are definitely an interesting sort of new community hub, whether it's opposed to or in addition to Discord, Telegram, and whatever else it might be. So anyway, I didn't mean to add a total tangent on the end of the conversation, but it was interesting to hear about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to wrap the hire thing, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change the branding. We'll see how that lands. If people are like really upset about it still, like it's not my job to just like go to war over a name. So like we'll like figure it out, and I can work with the community on fixing it. And then yeah, I love that suggestion of like being more open on Warpcast. Like I said, it's just like a time thing. I just haven't had a lot of time to do it.
Yeah.
But there are like certain Warpcast people that are engaging with me in like a very positive way. And so I just know that community is like pretty important. And also like seeing the success of like Clanker and like various things there. There's clearly like a home court advantage for our community too, to be able to be over there.
Nice. Yeah, well, let me know if I can be helpful at all on the hire stuff. I can be, I think like Lex Friedman is the he's trying to mediate like Putin and Zelensky. I can do hire. I can do hire and hire. I
That'd
think
be
I can
sick.
handle that.
If someone wants to get on a call and we can do a moderated discussion, I think I'm open to it.
Yeah, I'll start with
Um,
that, and then one day I'll be maybe mediating these global wars like Lex. But you got to start small and then go higher. So all right, cool,
I
man.
would not be
Well,
surprised, man.
I appreciate the time and the call, and like what you're building, and we'll look forward to keeping tabs on everything.